I'm Emily, just an ordinary woman who found herself in an extraordinary situation. My life was pretty normal until I met Ryan. We bumped into each other at a charity event held in our town. He was there volunteering, and I was representing my company. It was one of those casual meet-cutes you hear about, but never really believe will happen to you. Sorry, I didn't see you there. Ryan apologized after accidentally spilling some coffee on my notes. It's okay. Accidents happen, I replied, trying to salvage what was left of my papers. We struck up a conversation, and I quickly realized that Ryan was a pretty great guy. He was good-looking, sure, but it was more than that. He was kind, talked passionately about helping others, and had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. We exchanged numbers, and before I knew it, we were going on dates, talking for hours, and sharing parts of our lives. Ryan often talked about his family, especially his mom, Diane. He said she had given up her career to raise him, and he admired her a lot for that. According to him, Diane was a caring mom who had always put him first. He spoke of her struggles, particularly her heart condition, which she'd been battling for years. It was clear that Ryan cared deeply for her, and I admired that. A few months into our relationship, Ryan introduced me to Diane. We met at her house for dinner. She was polite, asked me a lot of questions about my job, my family, and my background. She was quite frail, and throughout the evening, she mentioned her heart condition several times, how it limited her and made her dependent on Ryan. I felt sorry for her, living with such a health issue. Emily, dear, it's so lovely to meet you. Ryan hasn't stopped talking about you, Diane said, with a smile that seemed genuine. It's nice to meet you too, Mrs. Thompson. Ryan speaks very highly of you, I replied, trying to make a good impression. We continued to see each other, and Ryan and I grew closer. But that dinner was the first time I met Diane, the woman who would later turn my world upside down. At that moment, though, I had no idea what was coming. I was just happy to be with Ryan and to be welcomed by his family. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a series of events that would completely change my life. The wedding came faster than I had expected. Ryan proposed, and I said yes without a second thought. We planned a simple yet elegant wedding. It was one of those perfect days. Clear skies, friends and family gathered, and a sense of joy in the air. I remember thinking as I walked down the aisle, this is it, the beginning of a beautiful life with Ryan. The ceremony was beautiful, and the reception was a blast. We danced, laughed, and celebrated our love. Ryan looked at me like I was the only person in the world. I felt so lucky. However, just a few weeks after our honeymoon, things took an unexpected turn. Diane's health supposedly took a downturn, and Ryan was beside himself with worry. Emily, my mom's doctor said her heart condition is getting worse. She needs someone with her all the time. I don't know what to do, Ryan told me one evening, looking genuinely distressed. We'll figure it out, Ryan. Maybe we can get a nurse to help her? I suggested, trying to find a solution. Ryan sighed. She refuses. She says she doesn't want a stranger taking care of her. She feels comfortable only with me. I could see the weight of the situation on Ryan's shoulders. After a lengthy discussion, we decided that Diane would move in with us temporarily. I thought, how bad could it be? It was his mother, after all. I wanted to be supportive. But soon, I began to notice changes around our home. It started with small things. Diane would move a vase to a different spot or rearrange the living room furniture. Emily, dear, I hope you don't mind. I moved some things around in the living room, just trying to make the space a bit more comfortable for me, Diane said one day, her tone polite yet firm. Oh, it's okay, I guess, I replied, trying to hide my surprise. It was her home too now, so I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. But as days turned into weeks, these small changes became more frequent. Our house started to feel less like our home and more like Diane's. She had an opinion on everything, from the way I cooked to how we should spend our weekends. It felt like she was slowly taking control, and I didn't know how to handle it. Ryan, don't you think your mom is overstepping a bit? She's changing everything around the house. I finally brought it up one night. Emily, she's just trying to make herself comfortable. It's not easy for her, you know, with her condition and all, Ryan said, sounding a bit defensive. I didn't want to push it further. Ryan was clearly torn between us, and I didn't want to add to his stress. but I couldn't shake the feeling that Diane's presence was slowly overshadowing our marriage. What started as a beautiful journey together was now turning into something I hadn't signed up for. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. With each passing day, the house I once loved started to feel unfamiliar. Diane's influence spread through every room, her preferences shaping our living space. It felt like I was living in someone else's home. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Diane rearranging the cabinets. "Oh, Emily, I hope you don't mind. I just can't find anything in these cabinets. I thought I'd organize them a bit," she said without looking up from her task. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. "I had them organized already, Diane. But I guess if this makes it easier for you." I trailed off, feeling a sense of loss. Ryan seemed to be in a world of his own, often at work or taking care of Diane's needs. Our conversations, once filled with laughter and dreams, were now brief and mostly about Diane's health or what she needed. I missed us, the way we used to be. "Ryan, can we talk?" I finally said one evening after dinner. "Sure, what's up?" he asked, looking tired. "It's about your mom. I feel like she's taking over our home. It's like her needs and wants are the only things that matter now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Emily, she's not well. She needs us. Can't you see that?" Ryan replied, a hint of frustration in his voice. "But what about us, Ryan? What about our needs, our home?" I pressed on, feeling a lump in my throat. "Look, I know it's not ideal, but she's my mom. I can't turn my back on her now," he said, looking away. The conversation ended there, but the distance between us grew. I started to spend more time alone in our bedroom, the only place that still felt a bit like mine. Ryan was either with Diane or working late. The laughter and love that once filled our home were replaced by a heavy silence, punctuated only by Diane's constant requests and suggestions. Our arguments became more frequent, each one leaving a deeper crack in our relationship. It was as if Diane's presence cast a long shadow, under which our love struggled to survive. One night, lying in bed, I turned to Ryan. "Do you remember how we used to be? How happy we were?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He turned to look at me, his eyes reflecting a sadness I hadn't seen before. "I do, Emily. I really do," he said softly. But the conversation ended there, swallowed by the silence that had become a constant companion in our lives. The house I had once been so excited to turn into a home with Ryan now felt like a place I just happened to live in. Food was once my playground, a place where I could experiment and express myself. But that too changed when Diane moved in. It started slowly. At first, she would just make suggestions. "Emily, maybe you should try less salt. It's not good for the heart, you know," Diane would say, hovering around the kitchen while I cooked. I didn't mind adjusting a recipe here and there, especially considering her health condition. But soon, her suggestions became more like commands. One evening, I was excited to try a new recipe I had found. It was a bit spicy, but nothing too intense. I thought it would be a nice change from our usual meals. "Diane, I thought we could try this new recipe tonight," I said, showing her the recipe. No, my heart can't handle anything spicy. Let's stick to what I know," she dismissed quickly, clutching her chest as if the mere thought of spicy food caused her discomfort. "But it's not that spicy. I think you might like it," I tried to persuade her. "Emily, I know what's best for my condition. Let's not take any risks," she said, her tone final. So I set the new recipe aside and cooked what Diane preferred. This became the norm. Our meals revolved around her dietary restrictions and preferences. Trying new recipes or flavors became a thing of the past. It wasn't just about the food. It was about losing yet another piece of myself, another aspect of my life that I no longer had control over. Cooking had always been my way of unwinding, of bringing joy to our home. Now, it felt like just another chore, another area where Diane held the reins. One day, I mentioned this to Ryan. "I miss cooking the way I used to. I miss experimenting with flavors," I said, hoping he'd understand. "Emily, we need to be considerate of Mom's health. She can't have certain things." "You know that," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "I understand. but it feels like I can't even enjoy cooking anymore. It's always what your mom wants or needs, I said, a hint of frustration in my voice. Can't you just let this go? For me? It's not like we're asking you to do anything major. It's just food, he said, sounding tired. I didn't say anything more. I didn't want to argue. But inside, I felt a growing sense of loss and frustration. It was as if with each passing day, another piece of my identity was being eroded away, leaving me feeling trapped and voiceless. Things took a turn for the worse one morning. I was getting ready to do some grocery shopping when I realized my bank card was missing. I always kept it in my wallet in the same slot, but it wasn't there. Panic surged through me. I turned the house upside down looking for it, but to no avail. "Diane, have you seen my bank card? It's missing," I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "Oh dear, no, I haven't seen it. Are you sure you didn't misplace it?" Diane replied, her face the picture of concern. I was sure I hadn't misplaced it. But what else could I say? I decided to let it go for the moment and use some cash I had stashed away for the shopping. A few days later, the bank sent a statement. I usually didn't bother with them, but this time I decided to have a look. Maybe there was a clue about my missing card. My heart dropped as I went through the list of expenses. There were several charges that I couldn't account for, things I knew I hadn't bought. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. There was only one person who could have taken the card, but I needed to be sure. "Diane, I need to talk to you," I said, holding up the bank statement. "What's wrong, Emily?" she asked, her eyes wide with what seemed like genuine concern. "My bank card is missing, and there are expenses here that I didn't make. Do you know anything about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, Emily, I took it. I needed medication, and I didn't want to bother you or Ryan. My heart, you know." Diane burst into tears, clutching her chest. I was in shock. I didn't know what to believe. Part of me wanted to believe her, to give her the benefit of the doubt. But another part, a growing part, was filled with doubt. I decided to tell Ryan about it. "Ryan, my bank card is missing. There are charges on it that I didn't make, and I think your mom took it," I said, bracing myself. "Emily, are you sure? That doesn't sound like Mom," Ryan said, looking bewildered. I confronted her. She admitted to taking it. She said it was for medication, I explained. Ryan went silent for a moment. "I'll talk to her. But, Emily, if it was for medication, we can't really blame her, can we?" he finally said. I didn't know what to say. The situation felt so surreal. I just nodded and walked away, feeling a mix of frustration, confusion, and a growing sense of isolation. The more I thought about it, the less it made sense. Something was off, and I was determined to find out what it was. I felt like I was living with a stranger, not knowing what to believe anymore. My trust was shaken, and I needed answers. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I decided to follow Diane one day. She had mentioned a doctor's appointment, but something told me that might not be the whole truth. So I grabbed a hat and sunglasses and followed her from a distance. To my surprise, Diane didn't go to a doctor's office. Instead, she entered a fancy restaurant. I felt my heart pounding as I followed her inside. I found a discreet spot where I could observe her without being noticed. I watched as Diane sat down with a group of women. There was no sign of illness or weakness in her demeanor. She was laughing, chatting animatedly, and seemed to be in excellent spirits. My heart sank as I realized that her doctor's appointment was a lie. I strained to listen to their conversation. What I heard made my blood boil. "You wouldn't believe how easy it is to control them," Diane was saying. "A little cough here, a little chest pain there, and they're putty in my hands." The women laughed, and one of them asked, "Aren't you worried they'll find out?" Diane waved her hand dismissively. "No, they're too naive, especially Emily. She believes every word I say." Hearing my name made my stomach turn. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. I pulled out my phone and started recording their conversation. I needed evidence. I needed Ryan to see the truth. After what felt like an eternity, Diane finally left the restaurant. I followed her back home, feeling a storm of emotions inside me. I was shaking, not just from anger, but from the sense of betrayal. That evening, I confronted Diane. "Diane, I need to see documents confirming your illness," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Diane's face paled, and she stuttered. What? What do you mean? My illness is none of your business. Ryan walked in, and his face showed concern. What's going on here? He asked. Diane has been lying to us. I have proof, I said, my voice firm. I played the recording from the restaurant. Diane's words filled the room, exposing her deceit. Ryan's face went from confusion to shock, then to disbelief. Diane's facade crumbled. Tears filled her eyes. I did it to keep control. To keep Ryan close, she sobbed. The room was filled with a heavy silence. The truth was out, naked and ugly. Diane's mask had fallen, revealing the manipulation and lies underneath. Ryan looked at his mother, his eyes filled with hurt and betrayal. I stood there, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that the truth was out, but sadness for the pain it caused. Our lives were about to change, and I knew things would never be the same again. The air in the living room was thick with tension. Ryan sat on the couch, his face a mix of shock and disbelief. Diane was crying, her body shaking with each sob. I stood, feeling both drained and determined. Ryan, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but we had to face the truth, I said, my voice steady but compassionate. Ryan looked up, his eyes red. I just can't believe it. Mom, how could you? His voice broke, the pain evident. Diane wiped her tears, looking up. Ryan, I was scared of losing you. You were all I had. I thought if I made myself seem needy, you'd stay close. That's no excuse for lying and manipulating us, Diane. You turned our home into a place of deceit, I said, trying to keep my anger in check. Ryan turned to me. Emily, I don't know what to say. I was blind to it all. It's not your fault, Ryan. She's your mother. You trusted her, I said, reaching out to touch his hand. Diane tried to speak. Emily, please. I didn't mean any harm. I pulled my hand away, feeling a surge of resolve. No, Diane. You crossed a line. You can't just play with people's lives and expect to be forgiven because you say you're sorry. It doesn't work that way. Ryan nodded, looking at his mother. Mom, you need to leave. This can't continue. You need to get help, but you can't stay here. Diane looked shocked. Ryan, please. I have nowhere to go. That's not our problem anymore. You made your choices, Diane. Now you have to face the consequences, I said firmly. Ryan stood up. I'll arrange for you to stay at a hotel for a few nights. After that, you're on your own. Diane stood, still crying. Please, Ryan. Mom, it's over. You need to pack your things, Ryan said, his voice laced with finality. The room fell silent except for Diane's sobs. It was a hard moment, but necessary. The confrontation had been brewing for a long time, and now the truth was out, raw and undeniable. I watched as Diane left the room, her steps slow and heavy. I turned to Ryan, seeing the mix of emotions on his face. I knew this was just the beginning of a long journey for both of us. Ryan, we'll get through this, but we need to start by being honest with each other and ourselves, I said, taking his hand in mine. Ryan squeezed my hand, a silent promise of solidarity. The confrontation and confession had marked an end, but also a beginning of healing, of rebuilding trust, and of moving forward. It was going to be tough, but I was ready to face it head on. No more illusions, no more deceit. Just the hard, unvarnished truth. In the quiet after Diane left, Ryan and I sat together, a shared sense of loss and relief between us. Our house, once a battleground of manipulation, now stood silent, a blank canvas waiting for a new start. Emily, I'm so sorry for everything, Ryan said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, filled with regret. Ryan, we were both caught in her web. It's not your fault, I replied, squeezing his hand for reassurance. He looked at me, his eyes searching. What now? Can we start over? I nodded. Yes, we can. But we have to be honest with each other, always. No more secrets, no more hiding. Agreed. We'll rebuild, together, he said, a note of hope in his voice. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. We repainted the walls, moved the furniture back to where we liked it, and slowly, our house began to feel like a home again. We talked more, not just about what had happened, but about everything. Our hopes, our fears, our dreams for the future. One evening, as we sat in our newly arranged living room, Ryan turned to me. "Emily, I've been thinking. Maybe we should renew our vows, start fresh." I smiled, feeling a warm glow in my heart. I'd like that. A new beginning. We planned a small ceremony, just close friends and family. Standing there, holding hands, repeating our vows, I felt a sense of peace. It was like shedding an old, heavy coat and stepping into the sunlight. As guests mingled after the ceremony, Ryan's sister, Sarah, came up to me. "Emily, you're amazing. You've been so strong through all this." I shrugged, smiling. "We do what we have to do, right?" Sarah nodded. "Yeah, but not everyone would have handled it as well as you did." I looked around, at the smiling faces, the sense of community and love. Sometimes, the hardest parts of life teach us the most important lessons. Ryan joined us, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. Like the lesson that some things are worth fighting for. "Yes," I agreed. "And the lesson that truth, even when it's hard, is always better than living in a lie." We stood there, a little family united by trials and love. The intrusion of illusions had ended, and in its place was something real, something strong. In the end, this wasn't just a story of deception and manipulation. It was a story of awakening, of finding strength in adversity, and of the incredible power of truth. It was our story, and it was just beginning.